Hello and welcome back to the Dream Space, where Max and I are going to be speaking a little bit about all the things that have been coming up in the Dream group and trying to answer some of your questions on how the dream really helps us through the Jungian lens. So, as you all know, we start our new dream course at the end of the month. We are closing registration on the 25th of July, and this dream group is called Dreams, Archetypes and Complexes. And there's just a few little kind of ideas around what dreams are through a Jungian lens, which is very different to most dream analysis. And I've had a lot of people message me saying, I don't really want to do dream analysis. So I want to just clear up some of these things, and Max is here to answer through the whole philosophy of Jung, what the dream does to us. So Max, when we're looking at dreams through a Jungian lens, we're not just looking at dream analysis, are we? It's much bigger than that. So can you give us an overview of why Jung used the dream, how it allowed to enter somebody's psyche and work with them on all the different levels? If you just share that with us, that would be really helpful.
Sure. So I think it really wasn't Jung who pioneered dream analysis, and I think that's important to understand, is that psychoanalysis, which was part of what Jung and his cohort and guys like Freud and Brewer and Adler, and they used the dream because in that day people were very repressed. And what I mean by that is that in the modern day there's full of their labels and their names for things, and everyone is this is their sexual orientation, their gender, and more things are becoming acceptable. But in Jung's day and Freud's day, that definitely was not the case. It was very much opposite. So you never wanted to air your dirty laundry. You never wanted to let people know that there was problems at home, or that your husband was beating you or cheating on you, or that you were doing, so there was all these repressive cultures from the Victorian age. Mm-hmm. So if I'm a psychiatrist and I want to work with somebody who's highly repressed, like Jung did, Jung had various tools at his disposal. One of them is called the word association test, which I'm sure a lot of people who even have a small amount of experience in this space know that the word association test helped Jung to sort of pick up on certain aspects of a person. So he would say the word love, they would have an immediate response or not, and he would be able to gauge certain complexes that were being triggered by the word association going. Now, it's quite commonly known these days that we have an unconscious part of our psyches that's called the shadow, as Jung called it, and that shadow is populated by our complexes. In fact, Jung's first naming of his own style of psychology was called complex theory and complex psychology. But later on, that was changed to analytical psychology. So the reason why dreams were such an important analytical tool was because the dream speaks to the personal unconscious. It speaks to what is housed within the repressed and suppressed self. And that's really why we use the dream as your first step towards self-analysis. And the reason why I say self-analysis is that a lot of courses that I've participated on or have been a facilitator on, a lot of people will be quite jarred by what is inside of the shadow. The whole point of working with your shadow is for it not to jar you.
Yes.
And not to hurt you and not to surprise you. So let's call it something like I'm in a relationship with a person and I keep on finding myself in a hurt place or in a place of pain with them. Now, the reason why I'm doing that is because something in my unconscious is working actively against me.
Yeah.
So the dream, and as you pointed out, this is a 3-month course. So The idea is to start with dreams because that's the royal road to the unconscious. So if I dream about a sister or a brother or a mother or a father, that helps me as the analyst or the person who's facilitating you. It helps me to understand what is reverberating around your unconscious. And it is probably the most succinct way of analyzing your shadow. But most importantly, it's the most succinct way of self-analyzation, which is really what we do on these courses that we offer. We want you to be able to reflect on yourself, because through reflection comes transformation.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with that, Mal. For me, it was, the dream is, it cuts all the, I'm Collette and this is my life and this is what's going on in it and this is what I've been through. Like, I don't need to do that. The dream reveals everything that's needed to be known to the analysts and to the people that are supporting my healing journey. Just by that one dream, there's so much can be taken from it without all that explanation. And I agree with you that society is changing in that it's becoming more acceptable to just be a bit more freer and be who you are. But even I know, working with people in groups, that's still really difficult to express parts of us that we might feel shame about or that we might feel is still not accepted. So yeah, it beautifully allows that gentle opening, doesn't it? It's just much more gentler than other approaches I've done.
Yeah, and I think that that's the whole point about it, is that, this self-flagellation and kind of coming to a place of understanding yourself through painful processing of hindsight. So, I did that and I did this and I did that to myself. This self-flagellation, this idea that I need to punish myself for being who I am, without an iota of self-awareness, you will end up punishing yourself.
Yep.
You will end up looking back and going, shit, I did that again to myself.
Yeah.
But with a bit of self-reflection and with dreams can be super critical. Let's not kid ourselves. They can be super critical and they can really, but the analysis is a lot gentler and is a sort of soft landing for self-analysis. And that's really the point, isn't it? Because hindsight doesn't allow it. It kind of sets us up for an unforgiving space to look at and reflect on ourselves. Whereas if you take complex, and when you, in the second part of our course, we're going to be looking at your killer complexes, or at your complexes that have a deep influence over your life. But we can't get there without going through the softer version, which is the dream analysis.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've kind of helped people understand why we're using the dream to get into this work. What might be beneficial, Max, is if we demonstrate an example of that through one of my dreams that I've posted in the group. So I can't remember how long ago it was now, maybe 3 weeks. I dreamt of a large body of water. It was a swimming pool with the people around me, and we were observing a killer whale in the water that breached the water, came right up in front of my face. It was right in my face. I remember in the dream being like, and then it went back into the water, and then it was showing off, it was doing its thing, and suddenly I ended up in the water with the killer whale, and lo and behold, the killer whale comes and takes me down. And I distinctively remember gasping for air, bracing myself, ready to be taken down. And as I went down, I held my hand up like this, ready to go down, and something pulled me out. So yeah, that dream, when I posted it in the group, there was part of me wanted to go down. That was what concerned me the most. Part of me wanted to go down with the killer whale. I wanted to go down there.
Yeah.
And then you talked about the instinct, which is important of that, the symbology of the animal. But also for me, the feelings that were mixed up in there. There was fear, there was, that awe of this creature and the fear of drowning. But also, I felt annoyed that I'd been pulled back up out of the water.
Okay, so dream analysis in its best form, as you know, Collette, is done through stages. So one of the things that immediately I picked up in the dream when I read it the first time is this is a battle with your instinct. Now, from a psychological point of view, or from a psychological jargon point of view, there exist two types of not conscious aspects of our psyche. The first one, obviously, is the unconscious, where our shadow kind of resides with all of those repressed memories and complex. But then there's the subconscious. Now, Freud speaks about the subconscious, but in today's day and age, it's kind of like a relic of the past. But the subconscious is populated by your instincts. So the instincts like sex, creativity, the need to food, for food and shelter. So those are more base animal-like instincts. So immediately, as soon as I saw the dream, the whale came up for me because it's an ancient symbol. Whales and humankind have interacted for a very long time throughout our history. And this is the thing about dreams, is that it borrows from an ancient relic, from the collective unconscious. So the collective unconscious is populated by archetypes. And those archetypes, they really have quite a strong influence over our psychic processes. But just to give our audience an idea, or people who are wanting to do dream analysis, I would pull this dream apart literally line by line, because everything matters. So I was at a swimming pool with many people. So the swimming pool obviously is a body of water, and we can generally associate bodies or closed bodies of water, not really the ocean, but closed bodies of water, as an emotional. So you're at an emotional juncture in your life.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, there's an emotional feeling, and there are stirred up emotions. So that's where we can really start, just from the very first opening line of your dream. I'm at a swimming pool.
Yeah.
So the narrative then goes, the pool is dark. Okay, you had a dark swimming pool. Now, I can imagine that if I go to a public swimming pool, my unconscious is naturally going to develop an anxiety or a nervousness if I see a dark body of water.
Yeah.
But the beauty of the symbol there is that the dark water means that it's something that is dark. It's an unknown emotion to you, or it's an emotion that still carries a darkness to it. So anxiety can be a dark emotion. So you can see that there's a slight buildup of anxiety. There's a trepidation coming. So that word dark is very important, because I know people think language is a fluid thing, but language really does dictate a lot of our life, and we use it in analytical psychology and in these analyses because the psyche is quite specific. We might think it's, even with a big fantasy dream, it's very specific in what it's delivering. I'm a flash of a moment, the biggest killer whale, or I suppose in a flash of a moment, the biggest killer whale I've ever witnessed breached the water and came larger than life into my face. So now the unconscious saying to you, listen, there's some kind of killer instinct here that needs to be addressed. Now this is when Collette in her dream parted ways. This is where Collette in her dream sort of went, no, it's not a killer whale. It's just an orca. It's not an orca. Its first name was killer whale before it became orca. And therefore, it exists as a killer whale in the psyche's, in the unconscious, or in the psyche.
And that's that place, isn't it, that we get to where that thing comes in and you're like, no, it's not bad. We can't help but do it. Like, no, it's a beautiful whale. No, it's a like you said, it's a killer whale. And you don't want to feel that. That's yeah. People know.
It's very confrontational. So let me elucidate a bit on what I termed a killer complex earlier. I don't mean a killer complex as in a murderous complex. I mean a killer complex as in a big complex. A complex, like if you take my case, and I think Collette probably shares this, is we have a big teacher complex. For instance, really do find meaning and fulfillment through teaching. So in this case, this killer whale is getting in your face. And it's getting in your face because it's trying to show you that there's an instinct, that it's risen from a dark place. It's an instinct that you need to engage with. Now, from working with you, we know that one of those killer instincts is probably money. So this is where where I started reading the dream, I was like, okay, this is not only a killer instinct, but this is a big complex. It's a whale of a complex. It's not a little fish. This is an elephant of a complex. And having worked with Collette closely for a long time, I knew that as soon as that whale appeared, I knew that this was a big complex in her life. And immediately I could think of a few of the killer complexes that she has. One of them being the money complex. So I thought, okay, here comes trouble. And that's why when I responded to her dream, I referred her to a quote about a confrontation with the instincts. Because sometimes when you analyze dreams, sometimes it's better to kind of borrow other people's words for me, because it helps to make the process more real. It legitimizes the process, if you like. So along comes her killer instinct, her killer complex, and what it does is it threatens to bury her. It threatens to drown her. And so the narrative here in the dream starts becoming very clear. This is a complex that is going to take you down. You are drowning. This complex is drowning you. The interesting thing, though, is that there's a redemption at the end of when she puts up a hand. Like you can imagine, you put your hand up in class like, sir, ma'am, I want to ask a question because I'm drowning in information. Yeah. So can you see how these little gestures, these little narratives and dreams, and when you look at them, and with our help, hopefully, when you're on the course with us, we can show you that dreams, these are the kind of things that dreams do. They use quite common symbolizations and quite common literalizations. But luckily, she put up a hand like a gesture that a student would do. Say, I have a question because I'm drowning in information. She put up a hand and she was saved. Our dreams don't like to necessarily have a redemptive quality. But one of the attractions of working with Collette over the period that I've worked with her is that her dreams always had an essence to them that I wanted to understand. And having worked with you as much as I have, Collette, to analyze your dreams is a lot easier. But I want to end off with the analysis is that it was a forewarning. Yeah. There was a forewarning here. And I'll let Collette either speak to that or not. It's not really the point. The point is that when we do this dream analysis, dreams generally have a prophetic nature to them, but it's not prophetic as in I prophesy, like you'll find Bible stories where, you'll have 7 years of good times and 7 years of bad times. And, Joseph tells Pharaoh exactly what's going to happen. The prophetic nature of dreams come because we live in a synchronistic universe. And dreams are dreamt in symbols, and symbols are not signs. Signs are very definitive about what they want you to do. So I'm driving down the road, I want you to stop. I'm driving down the road, I want you to yield. I'm driving down the road, I want you to slow down. That's a typical of a sign, but a symbol, a whale, as you see, has many illustrations. So maybe down the road, when Collette was confronted with this killer complex, when she was confronted by this killer whale, it was a foreboding and it was a forewarning that something is going to take you down. Over to you, Collette.
So yeah, this was one of those dreams that was jarring, one that I didn't want to really go into, because when you put that quote to me, I went into all those defensive places, which I recognized was me not wanting to go there. Like, no, this is not true. And I knew I was ignoring the message, basically. And that diminished me. I felt diminished, which was the whole essence around my money complex. And in the work that I've done with you, this kept coming up, the money complex, and I didn't want to go there. I've never wanted to go there. It's been an area of, I've had a belief that money isn't important. I've had a belief that money wasn't my motivating force or the way that I've been driven through life, and it wasn't something I ever needed to give attention to, because it's not been a worry at all. And this was saying to me, this is going to become a worry for you.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to face this ugly, that I have this, there you go, there's my wounding with money, this ugly, you know, thing that I have to talk about money or face money or deal with it. And what happened then is the warning was so accurate, because something happened in my personal life that drew the money complex slap bang in my face and said, now you've got to address it. And so it took me to, if without the knowledge of the dream, let me tell you, I wouldn't have been able to face the situation, and that was this weekend just gone by, in the way that I did if I didn't know what it was trying to make me do. So it took me, it brought up a load of childhood wounding, which I believe is where the money complex in me is developed as well. It's brought up a lot of anxiety, a lot of heartache, a lot of spotlights in areas of my life that I'd been ignoring. And so it's been a whole catalyst of things around the money complex. Like, the money complex is the center, and there's so many things in my life that are feeding off this money complex that I am now not fully aware of, but beginning to be shown. This is where this is not ruining your life, but leading your life, and you're not in control of it because you're not conscious of it. So now I'm aware that I'm unconscious about this money complex, and the work for me now is to bring this complex into my consciousness, to know more about this complex, to see how it's been riding my life and driving my life, and how that will impact me if I don't begin to make it conscious. And I think what happened this weekend is a little, you know, was a precursory to what could happen if I don't start to work with this.
So, and that's why the dream, right from the get-go, it's saying, I'm going to show you something.
Yeah.
The dark pool. The dark pool is key. Now, not all of us are going to dream about dark pools, and this is where dream analysis becomes the blind spot. Is it the blind spot now, 2-3 weeks later after the dream, there's, you know, something's come up to say, I'm back again. If you want to have another dream about a killer whale in dark pools, I'm coming for you next time. So we won't all dream about dark pools, but there might be a dark rock, or there might be an unknown tree, or it will show you that there's something that needs to be looked at, and it draws your attention through it. But that drawing of attention, it's very difficult as individuals, and I've worked with people who have done dream analysis for a long time. For their own personal unconscious, it becomes difficult for them to identify the warning bells, or to identify how to navigate through it, because that's really the point, isn't it? That's the point of the dream space and through the lens, is to say, we will help you navigate, because there's future transformation here, there's future development, there's future self-awareness here.
Yeah. And that was, you know, it was potent medicine for me to be able to get that warning and to know what this situation was all about, because I wouldn't have connected the dots. I wouldn't have said, oh, that's what that was trying to show me. And there's more to it, isn't there? There's more to that dream that needs to be unpicked so that I can get to these other like, you know, like I want to know what this rescue is and then what's my way out, you know, and I think there's lots of bits that will be useful to me as I go into the deeper analysis. But I think the thing for me to point out here, Max, is that those dreams that we share and the dreams that we have, we don't want to go into them the way they need to be gone into. We prefer to do that the way what we want to believe or fantasize the dream is about. And it's so difficult, isn't it, to push that part of yourself aside to be able to see the true message. And that's why you need the analysis. That's why you need the other person saying, no, you're missing this bit. And it's not because you're a terrible person, you don't want to see yourself. It's just that it's just not possible to do it. It's really difficult to put part of yourself to one side to have the truth delivered to you.
Yeah, I think I did post the quote, but inside the dream space. But Jung said that when you go into the unconscious, you yourself become unconscious. And that's the trouble with, if I take, for instance, the one dream that was posted by one of the delegates about whatever, it doesn't really matter what it was, but when her reaction to our questions was, no, it's not that. And that's fine. I mean, it's cool. We're all here on our own path, and we're all telling ourselves the stories we tell ourselves. But the value of this work is that, and I say this from a deeply personal perspective because I've been doing this work for a long time, the value of the work is that I have another self. And that self doesn't necessarily want to be revealed. That other self does, but yet that other self possesses me. That other self directs my life. And that's why things like dream analysis and word association and complex analysis, that's why it's so important, because that other self can direct your life in a very negative way, or a very unhealthy way, or a destructive way. And that's, for me, the biggest awakenings I've had about my own complexes, about my own dreams. They have helped me to progress my thinking as a human being. And that is one of my dominant functions, is thinking. But it's helped me to accept it. And when I was speaking to my wife about it, I was saying, so interesting, because I was told all of my childhood by my mother that I was stupid. And that is inculcated into me. But because of this work that I've done, I've been able to take that negative input that was given to me by the mother, and I've been able to realize that I've turned that around and I've transformed it to allow my intellect to come through and to allow that dominant function to shine, if you will, or to a degree, of course.
Yeah. I mean, the defense mechanisms that we have. No, I've already done that work. No, I've already done that. Or, it doesn't mean that. And for me, that was like, I go to that place where I'm like, screw you, like, you're trying to make me feel bad about myself, or, that's my kind of defense mechanism. But it jolted something inside of me. And I sat with it and I allowed it to penetrate me, because I want to do this work. I want to see where I'm blind. And it was to do with, I really felt like, okay, what if I am in my instincts about money in my life? And what are those instincts? And, the instinct, the killer whale, the survival, that came up. Oh my gosh, money's survival for me. And we talked about this, didn't we, with the analysis? And so I thought I was conscious about the fact that my money just isn't important to me. I'm not driven by money. I'm driven by my soul work and da-da-da. But if the instinct is driving my money complex, then my soul isn't. And that's something that the quote said. It said about, you put something about it not being connected to my soul, and that really brought it up. No, I've not. Do you know why money isn't connected to my soul? Because I've not spent the time on it. I've not made it conscious. I've not done the work on it. So this is an area of my life I haven't done work on. And now it's time. It's that dream is like, you've got no more time to sit with this, because if you don't, you're going to go under.
Yeah. And isn't that really the object and I suppose, the telos of our work? That it's to draw the consciousness to yourself. Because I don't think it takes much analysis to see that the world is in an unconscious place. There's a lot of unconscious behavior. There's a lot of, I live in Africa. I see a lot of unconscious behavior of littering, for instance, something simple that you would think would have been knocked out of us by now. But and I'm being generalist, but I think the whole point is the work is here to bring us to a consciousness about ourselves, and that in itself brings a consciousness to to your surroundings and to, you know, what you do. So I think that that's really the point of the work and doing it.
So I want to talk about that because, you know, we speak about the collective unconscious a lot, and I realized that, I mean, the first time I actually grasped the concept was that I realized that there was all these like fairy tales, myths, stories, movies, TV programs, nursery rhymes, blah blah blah, and they all tell the same story in a different way with the same characters. And I was like, well, if it's the same story, you know, like the birth of Jesus is like a story that's been told by many different religions in with different names and different stories about this hero or the savior or whatever, then the world is made up of these complexes and these archetypes, sorry, that, you know, that we all must have too. So like that means there's this big worldwide game where all these characters exist, and we must be in all those characters, playing out those myths, stories, movies, whatever. And yeah, and you shared something that made this very clear to me, where I've been kind of getting prophetic mixed with the collective unconscious, in that, you know, if you've got a white car, you said it the other day, that you start noticing everyone's got a white car. I've got a Beetle, and I notice everyone's got Beetles. Well, of course they were always there before, but you start to connect dots, don't you? You make connections because you've become aware of it. So you might dream of a fire someone did in the group, and then a fire happens at your friends, and you suddenly say, "Oh, that's prophetic." But there could be a million fires the next day in other places that you're just not aware of. So we become conscious of it because something has brought it into our consciousness. So when we're talking about the collective unconscious in a dream and in the work with Jung, how is Jung using the collective unconscious to work with people? What was his main like theory about that? And that might help people in the group understand why we keep talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult for me to give you the full theory of it, but what is important in relation to dreams is that Andrew Samuels, who's a Jungian analyst, he says that archetypes are where the energy is at. So it's the point, it's the beginning point. That's what animates, and that's what provides the libido to the complex to act out. So the collective unconscious is basically all of humanity's stories, all of humanity's history, everything that's happened to us, whether it's been a Holocaust, or whether it's been the story of Cinderella that was initially, like you'll find the story of Cinderella in many cultures, Egyptian culture, German culture, English culture, and there are different variations of it. So the collective unconscious, the reason why Jung spoke about it is because inside of those are archetypal images and imagos. And so it's like a download, if you like. So the collective unconscious is the world, if you like, and then the archetypes are the things that populate the world, and then the complexes that are within our personal unconscious, those are the things that are on the world, the little bits and pieces. So that's why it was such an important realization, because it took away this notion that we are driven by our animal instincts only. We're only driven by sex. So Freud had this thing like everything's about sex. You know, if you dream about a sword coming through the door. Oh, that's a penis coming into the door. Somebody pulls out a gun. Okay, so they're pointing their penis at you. So Freud had this idea, and Jung said no, but there's more to us. And what Jung was referring to was, he was talking about genetics essentially, and what the base of our psychology is. Of course, in those days they didn't have that language. They didn't have language that we have today, like neuroscience has. But his genius was that this collective unconscious means that we can develop almost any type of complex. Anything. We could have a rose collecting complex. We could have a repurposing complex. We can have a money complex. We can have an art. So that was really the whole theoretical point that he was trying to make, is that the collective unconscious harbors all of humanity's memories, all of humanity's associations, all of humanity's imagos. And I think I did speak a bit about it about this 2 million-year-old man that he speaks about. So we carry that collective unconscious within our psychic structure, but we can't, when I say we carry it, obviously we can't imbibe it like we do our shadow. It doesn't sit directly within the personal unconscious, but it sits there. And we pull down. When we dream, we're essentially pulling down those images, those ancient images. Dreaming about a killer whale, if you think about it, in ancient times, before civilizations, the majority of humankind lived on the coast because it was easy to forage there. It was easier to make a living on the coast, because that's where there was a multitude of food substances. So you can imagine an ancient man or woman or whatever looking out at sea and seeing this killer whale, porpoising or displaying, or you can imagine that killer whales used to come into the bays where they used to hunt for salmon and sharks. And so they would have these close encounters with killer whales. So our association with killer whales goes back literally hundreds of thousands of years. Yeah. And that's why the dreams present as a collective unconscious. It presents with these images and these images that we carry.
And you mentioned the archetypes, because that's something we will be going into in the groups. We'll be looking at archetypes. And I mean, people know what archetypes are out there who haven't done Jung work, because it's become quite like a in vogue thing to talk about. And obviously we've got teachers out there, the big name teachers, and they've tried to really condense the archetypes. Like I know Carolyn Mace is someone who's listed the archetypes, but they're inexhaustible, aren't they? The amount of archetypes. We can't just say there are 4 or 12 archetypes like a lot of people have said there are. They're much more inexhaustible than that, aren't they? There's many, many, many.
Yeah, so they're inexhaustible simply because the father archetype has so many variations. So there is one archetype. There's, for instance, another archetype. So let's say whatever that looks like. But our psyche downloads it into a billion different variations. So to call a complex an archetype, this is the kind of learning, these are the kind of borrowings that people have made from Jung's work. So I'll give you the typical example. Archetypes are one of them. As you said, they get kind of mixed up with complexes. But that word ego, my God, that word has really been given a bad name.
Yeah.
I mean, the ego is the central archetype within the psyche. Now, to go and explain that might take another hour, but the point is that a lot of these terminologies have been borrowed from Jung's work because his body of work was so huge. I mean, I think he produced 20 written books just on the collective, just on in the collected works, never mind all the black books and the red book and all the other work. His work was vast. It was lifetimes of work. And that's where his genius was. It's his, the amount of things that he looked at, and the collective unconscious being some of his biggest works and some of his most seminal works. But
and that, I want to just stop you there with the archetype, because the complex is something I didn't know about until I did the Jungian work, because the complex is rarely mentioned out in the world. The archetype is the be all and end all, but that's the umbrella, isn't it? Because when we get to work on the individual self, we get to work with the complex that comes from that archetype, and that's a collection of like your personality, your behaviors, your wounds, it's all embroiled, the shadow part of you, the light part of you. And that is where the real work actually starts to happen, isn't it? Is when we start to go into the complexes within us. I found that anyway, that I'd done archetypal work before. I did archetypal work with some teachers, but it never hit. It was the bigger picture rather than zooming in on me into those unique qualities that make up a complex. So I just wanted to share that, because we will be looking at the complexes that come through the dreams via the archetype, won't we? So that people get to be able to home really in on what that is showing inside of them, rather than a general overview.
Yeah, so the real point of this work is individuation and being on the path of individuation. And what
And
that means,
just
yeah,
explain individuation for people, because in the world that we've come from, a lot of people in the group, it's
mm,
enlightenment. Or so, what is individuation? What does that word mean?
mm. I think Jung would be quite offended if you thought it was enlightenment.
Yeah.
But I think that enlightenment can't happen in one lifetime. I don't think so. Not particularly not in modernity. But individuation is about knowing thyself. Know thyself. And if that really is a core value that you carry, then these types of courses really are, they become attractive because it's about knowing thyself, you know. And the complexes, as I said earlier, is that they can govern your life, and you won't know it because you call it something else, or you give it a different quality, or you give it a different thing. The whole work of individuation is to first deal with the complexes and accept that they exist within your psyche. You can't eject them. You can't throw them away. You can't know, oh, well, I'll just take my magic screwdriver. And if that was the case, you could imagine how many crazy people there would be. But the whole point of what Jung was trying to say is individuation is about knowing thyself, about giving yourself the latitude, the space to accept aspects of yourself that without looking at them, you can't accept them. And that's where transformation happens. So yes, you could liken it to, to the idea of enlightenment, but it is really a life path for the seeker, for the person who seeks to develop themselves, for the person who wants to get more balance and more regulation in their psyche. Because I think that what happens, and just one last thing, Collette, is that when we get to a certain age, as Jung called it, when you get to the second half of your life, the one thing that you really are tired of is that person at the party. You know, I rock up at the party, I tell the same jokes, I get drunk or I don't, or I have all of these little rules that I follow. By the time you start getting into your late 30s and 40s and that is, you feel quite exhausted by yourself. And I think that in my experience with a lot of people I've worked with as a facilitator, I really have encountered a person who wants to change their language. They want to learn a new language. They want to develop a language that can help them speak to themselves without lashing themselves, without self-flagellating themselves. And that's the whole point of this work, is that Jung often said, suffering is not meaning. And that's a very important part of this work, is that a lot of people end up suffering because of this self-analysis. But the point is that if you can not leapfrog over your unconscious and see that, oh yeah, I'm going to go and play in the garden and, in the bush and what, that's not the point. The point is you have to confront yourself, and that can lead to suffering. But most importantly, and I want to make this very clear, most importantly, it leads to meaning. Happiness is nebulous. Satisfaction is temporary. Maybe some people are happy and satisfied all at once. I would like to meet those people. But the whole point of self-awareness and self-knowledge and knowing ourselves is that you're looking for meaning, more meaning in your life.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a noble cause. And I think that that's a noble thing to do, because you're kind of offering yourself a balm for your soul.
And a lot of us have been like on, those that are into spirituality and consciousness and psychology and all these things tend to marry up at some point on a path for people, is that, we followed this ideology of Eastern philosophy, and that there's, enlightenment, and everyone just forgot about self-realization. And of course, in the Eastern philosophy, there's self-realization before enlightenment. So self-realization, individuation. And there seems to be this like new age pandemic that wants to skip over self-realization. They want to go from like, I'm a wounded person and oh my God, already I'm ascended, I'm higher, I'm walking high, life is bliss. And they all want to miss the childhood woundings or the shadow behaviors or the personality complexes in themselves that are causing havoc in the life. And there is no skipping this. There is no skipping your unconscious. There is no skipping this at all. And this is what I've seen in the spiritual circles, Max, is And I know you don't really see these, this is not where you've come from, but it's where I've come from. There are many people pooling around in circles, circles of trauma, suffering, wounding, all of those things, because they're unwilling to see themselves. They want to jump to enlightenment. And this is what the dream allows us to do, doesn't it? And the courses like we're running, it allows you to come into some realization of yourself, and mostly humble realization of yourself, that allows you to be more compassionate to yourself and to other people.
I think that to me is a big lesson, is that I think that in modernity, the need to rush through things and to kind of get a result immediately, it's like a disease. It's like we're skipping out on ourselves. It's like a cancel culture. I'll just cancel my unconscious because it doesn't suit me. And that's really not the point. The point is that I think when you get to a certain age or a certain set of, a certain sense of maturity, you really can't do that anymore. It's not an option. You have to confront yourself. And that's really, I think that brought you to the work, that brought me to the work, and I think that brought a lot of people who are in the dream space on our Facebook page. Those people have a calling. They might not even know that they're having a calling. They might just be there thinking, oh, look, I coincidentally just found this space and I found this platform. But the truth be told is that your psyche will draw you. It will draw you along. It will take you along for the ride. And the less you know about your psyche, the more of a ride it will be. And generally not such a good ride. It could be quite disastrous.
Exactly. So we're going to finish there, Max, but let's just reiterate that what we're trying to do in this course that we've got coming on is take people into what was labelled the great work, the self-realization, individuation work, and we're using the dream as the little loophole to get in and start going with it. So all these, if anyone's looked at Jung's books, that you open them, I kept opening them for years and was like, hell no, like I don't even understand it. So we're taking all these bodies of work and we're putting them into easy digestible applications and questions to yourself, with the dream as the material. So I used to say, like in yoga, the body was my access point to work with people's emotions and psyches and all of that. And that's what we're doing. The dream is the modality to get in there.
Correct.
Yeah.
So just to speak about the application work, because that's really where the whole process starts, is that Collette and I have designed applications based on our own experience and our own teachings and also what we've learned. And each month there will be at least 2 to 4 applications that you'll be given. When you come into the course, you'll be given some theoretical stuff and you'll be given applications, which you'll do on a weekly basis. And you can or cannot, you may, if you want to, you can post the stuff, but I would always strongly suggest that you share on some level. Some people have deeply personal sharings that they don't always feel comfortable, but the applications are a step-by-step guide to help you access the unconscious material, which we all, and I say this with conviction, we all have a natural resistance to the unconscious work. And the application helps us to draw that unconscious material out and then look at it. And hopefully the group will be strong enough and intimate enough for us to share, those kind of applications. There are some applications, maybe in complex work, that you might want to share directly, but you might want to share some of the outcomes of those applications. But the applications essentially are a step-by-step guide, which help you to navigate through the different theoretical processes that Jung and other psychoanalysts have developed over the last century.
Yeah, and I want to, just before we go, highlight the profound movements that I've got, be it in this kind of work you've seen where I've been submitting those applications and sharing. that for me was the biggest movement, is when I can share and be seen and get the feedback from. But of course there's just some things that you don't want to, and you don't have to, so we're happy to work with people however they feel comfortable in the group. But there is a beauty. I mean, all my work at the moment with women is done in these forums, and you know, any of them will share testimony to the difficulty that they found to do that at first, but then the profound healing and movement that happens from doing it. So that's why we want to be in that kind of forum space, because I find it mind-blowingly supportive to any process.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, Collette, is that, you know, the whole thing about these experiences is that you build community. And community can be exceptionally healing. I mean, there are many sayings, you know, it takes a community to raise a child, for instance. And that's the whole thing, is that these communities become very supportive environments for these type of processes. But then it becomes a long-term community. And myself, you know, prior to the pandemic or prior to COVID-19, I was in a community of literally thousands of people who were like-minded, who had gone through the processes that I'd been through, you know, prior to them. But there was always this sense of community. There was always a sense that I could reach out individually to people off the forum. I could reach out to Collette. I could reach out to Max.
Yeah.
And I could feel this sense of that I'm supported, even if it's far away, even if it's somebody who's on the other side of the world. That sense of community is something that has been completely devastated by the pandemic, by COVID-19, and by the whole, you know, what's developed out of it. I mean, we're going, if the world wasn't crazy 2 years ago, boy, it is rapidly gone crazy, or even more crazier. So Collette and I are looking to really develop a community,
Yeah.
and to build that community up. And yes, it involves doing courses with us, but I think that's really the idealized outcome that we would like, is to have a community of like-minded people.
I totally agree, and the support in that, because it's so bloody needed right now. It really is needed, where everything's seen, the rugs getting pulled under everybody's feet, and it feels like it's time that we came together in the radically truthful, like real environments. I know that having been in a group and holding these groups, that radical honesty in there, it gives us a profound level of connection. It's like we're not Peter Perfects or Polly Perfects. We're in there, and we're raw, and we're real, and we're emotional, and we screw up, and we get things wrong, and it's so beautiful to see that. It makes us feel so tired, because we're just being unfiltered human beings.
Yeah, and we're living in a world of falseness, of so many false things, fake news, false politicians, you know, disinformation, dissemination of society, you know. And so this is kind of the new world order, is virtual communities.
Yeah.
And I know that Collette has built them, I've been part of them, you know, when I was with the Center for Applied Union Studies. So these communities exist, and they do get built, you know.
Yep. So we look forward to you all, and we may be dropping in some more little videos and questions on the run up, but we just want to reiterate that you have until the 25th of July to sign up, and then the group's already open, and we've entered people in the group already, and I've put a video in there asking people just to introduce themselves, so you can start to come in now and just bed yourself in the group, and we really encourage that. But we will cut off on the 25th and say no more registrations, so you've got till then. So if you want to join, jump in, just press going on the group, you just click going, and then I will contact you and let you know how we navigate the rest. So thank you all for tuning in, Max, and thank you again.
Thanks, Collette, and wishing everyone well, and hope to see you in the dream space and through the lens. Thanks for your time.